ESPN NFL insider Jeremy Fowler reports that the Chicago Bears could be trade deadline sellers at the 2024 NFL trade deadline. We're going to talk about this here on Chicago Bears Now. He mentioned 4 players in particular that Ryan Poles could move on from. So we're going to break all that down here on the show today. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. And we want you guys to get involved early here. Should the Bears buy or sell at the trade deadline? What say you? B for buy, S for sell. Let us know in the comment section down below. All right, so here was part of Jeremy Fowler's reporting. He said the Bears are, quote, in position to deal away extras. Kind of talked about how the Bears, the last couple of years, despite not being in win now mode, bought Montez Sweat, tried with Claypool, didn't work out, tried to build up that roster. But now that the depth is in place, there's some players on this roster that are extras and don't really have a role on this team. And like I said, he mentioned 4 players in particular that could get moved before the NFL trade deadline. So we're going to kind of go through these players, and I'll give my thoughts. And then toward the end, I'll kind of analyze, should they buy, should they sell, could they do both? 12 days until the NFL trade deadline comes and goes. All right, first guy. Someone who's been talked about a lot, Ian Rappaport, about a week ago now, had the initial report that Nate Davis is someone that the Bears could trade, someone who's garnered some interest around the league. Jeremy Fowler adds that the Bears are willing to cover some of his $8.75 million salary to trade him. And I think that speaks to a couple of things. One, they're pretty desperate to move off of him, even if that means they have to eat some money. And 2, if they can get a draft pick to do so, they would love to do that. I wonder if the trade deadline comes and goes and Ryan Bates gets back and healthy, would they just cut Nate Davis after the deadline if they're unable to move him? I would not rule that out. Clearly, this is just one of those moves that has not worked. Ryan Poles tried to bolster the interior of the offensive line with him, 3-year, $30 million deal, which is a decent deal at the time, considering how much the guard market has exploded. And he just has not played that well when he's played and hasn't been available a ton either. He's had a couple of injuries. He had the familial situation last year, which I gave him a pass for. Tough to lose a parent and focus on football, but a year later still doesn't seem that interested, which is fine. But I've always said this: if football's a sport, you're either all in or you're not. And if you're not all in, it's kind of hard to play. It's very violent, physical, focus-oriented sport. I think the Bears have kind of moved on from this experiment. So keep an eye on Nate Davis over the next couple of days. Here's a new name, Dominique Robinson. Jeremy Fowler says, quote, the Bears are weighing trade options with Robinson. Of course, he's been inactive all season. This kind of falls into the category of, if you can get anything for him, late round pick swap, whatever, I think it's just an automatic pull the trigger. I did not have high hopes for him coming into year 3. He did virtually nothing last year. He honestly looks better as a rookie than he did in his second season, in my opinion. But, this was a team that was viewed as one that lacked pass rushers and depth, et cetera. Well, you brought in Darrell Taylor. Austin Booker immediately is better than him. Obviously, Montez Sweat's there now. There's just really not a role for Dominique Robinson at this point. Obviously, if someone were to go down, he would be active on game day probably, but you've got Daniel Hardy, who contributes more on special teams, and Jacob Martin is eligible to return from short-term IR. He's been practicing for a couple of weeks now. So I think the Bears look at this like, when Martin's back and healthy, he kind of just takes Dom Rob's spot. So if a team would throw a late-round pick at him, they would probably just take it. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not sure anybody would trade for him. Maybe there's a young team with not a deep roster that's like, let's just take a flyer on a guy who has an athletic profile. But I think it's pretty safe to say, like, his chances of having an impact in Chicago are pretty much dead at this point. Before we continue, today's show is sponsored by Turtle Beach, the #1 gaming headsets and accessories. We appreciate them for sponsoring today's show. I'm rocking my Turtle Beach headset today, and it picks up audio so clearly that you're basically cheating when you play video games, which I do a lot. Get 10% off with code CHAT at turtlebeach.com/chat. And I personally recommend you get their all new Gen 3 Stealth 600 headset, as it is the best gaming headset out there. If you play first person shooters, you'll hear every footstep, every reload, every enemy sneaking up on you as if they were in your living room. You're going to have the best audio quality out there. Turtle Beach gives you a leg up against the competition in the gaming world. And more than that, just gives you the best overall experience. Maybe you're someone who plays sports games like I do, Madden, College Football 25. You can hear the crowd noises, the broadcast piped straight into your headset, and it feels like you're actually in the stadium. It's remarkable how crisp and how real the audio is. And by the way, best part about these headsets is how comfortable they are, because there's nothing worse than playing video games for several hours and then you just kind of have a headache after wearing a heavy and uncomfortable headset. That is not the case with Turtle Beach. So once again, you get 10% off with code chat at turtlebeach.com/chat. That link and promo code are in the comments and description of this video. It's turtlebeach.com/chat, code chat for 10% off. All right, Khalil Herbert here. Jeremy Fowler also mentioned that Herbert should receive interest despite being out of the Bears running back rotation. There was a report out there that the Vikings were interested in him before they traded for Cam Akers. If that's true, I'm guessing Poles just either didn't want to trade him within the division or didn't like the offer enough to trade him within the division. And I think Poles has also seen what Herbert can do, so he'd rather not trade him to a team that the Bears play twice later this season. Which is totally understandable, but he's not in your rotation. Now, I see both sides of the coin here. Like, one, what is a trade offer going to look like for an expiring rookie running back that's not going to start for a team? Probably a late round pick swap. Do you just keep him in case an injury pops up if the trade isn't anything notable at all? I would certainly understand that argument as well. It's a tough one because I like Khalil, but I think the Bears look at this like DeAndre Swift is their primary runner. He catches the ball well. He's been running well the last few weeks. They paid him. Obviously, he's the guy. And Roschon is better at the utility stuff. He's better in short yardage, and he catches the ball and blocks better than Herbert. So even though Herbert's a better runner, especially in this system, wide zone, getting to the perimeter, than Roschon Johnson, Roschon can do more of the grunt work, more of the nasty work. And, that kind of leaves Herbert as the odd man out. Like, I said it throughout training camp, like, you're too crowded at running back. Someone is going to get squeezed out, and Herbert's kind of been that guy. And, oh, by the way, Travis Homer had his practice window opened, and while I don't think Homer is that good of a running back at all, one thing he does do is contributes on basically every special teams unit. And Herbert does some of that, but not as well as Homer. So I just think you kind of look at this where it's like, hey, Khalil, we appreciate what you've done here. You're probably not in our future plans. If a pick is out there, I think you'd have to consider it. But I would be a little hesitant because if Swift or Roschon were to go down, you'd feel very comfortable plugging in Khalil Herbert and having him play. This is a guy that's rushed for almost 2,000 yards in his career. He clearly can play. He's just kind of found himself on the outside looking in right now. So I think he's a wild card. I would understand it if they moved him, but I would also understand it if they kept him. All right, another new one to discuss. Larry Borom, who also had his practice window open. Sounds like he could return soon. And Fowler kind of says, hey, their teams could look at the Bears' offensive tackle depth as an area to poach a player. And I said this at the end of during training camp, like, could you flip him to a team like the Patriots, right, at the time, and it's still played out, their offensive line is terrible, and could use a player who has at least started, I think he started 22 games or something like that. He's kind of like, I don't want to be unfair to Khalil Herbert. Herbert's been a much better player than Larry Borom, but he's kind of like the Khalil Herbert of this offensive line, where if he has to play, he can hold his own. Herbert's clearly a higher level player, but this is a guy who's played experience, can play multiple positions. So I would understand if there's some intrigue, but also an expiring contract. I would not expect to get much of anything at all if you flipped out Borom. But once he's healthy here, I mean, you've got your two starting tackles, you've got Braxton Jones. You've got Matt Pryor, who can play tackle if you need him to. You still have Jake Curran on the practice squad if in a pinch you needed to elevate someone. If you could get a pick for Larry Borom, your fourth tackle at this point, because I think Amagaji is the swing right now, you would probably take it. So maybe the Bears are going to try and get him healthy and, be like, yeah, be healthy, come call, and see if a team bites. Again, I don't view Larry Borom as a player who's going to help the Bears right now or really moving forward. Could they bring him back on a 1-year deal next year? As just a depth piece, maybe. But I think he'd have a better chance to get on the field elsewhere. Subscribe and join us. We will be live today on the channel, 4 o'clock. That says Eastern time, 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 Central time. Sorry about the typo there. We will be live here on the channel. So rock and roll with us as we'll have the latest trade discussion, get you ready for Bears Commanders, Jaden Daniels update, Bears injury updates. Those will all be out by the time we go live. So be sure to subscribe and join us. Okay, so let's gotta put a bow on this. What should Chicago do? I do like the idea of selling small assets, especially guys who are on expiring deals and are unlikely to return. Like Khalil Herbert, I like the player. He's unlikely to be back. Like they'll probably just draft a guy in like the 6th round to be their 3rd running back, right? So he's unlikely to be back. Larryborm, unlikely to be back. Dominique Robinson, he's never done anything since his first game against Trent Williams, of all players to go up against and have success. Like if you can get a pick for him, go ahead and do it. I will say this, though. I would not rule out a big swing. I could see the Bears selling small and potentially buying big. Now, I'm not saying you force the issue. I'm not saying you treat 2024 as an all-in move. But if there is a big-time pass rusher or offensive line that has contractual control, in other words, he's under contract beyond this year, I would consider that depending on the price if I was Ryan Poles. I'm not saying trade 2 firsts and a 3rd for Max Crosby if that's how much it costs, but you can get him for a 1 and a 3. I wouldn't rule it out. If there's an offensive guard or even a tackle that you really like or a center that you really like and is under contract for multiple years, I wouldn't rule that out. Again, I don't think you force the issue, but Ryan Poles is a pretty opportunistic GM. He's been a guy that throughout his career has taken swings. So if there's one out there, I would not rule that out. It feels like the Bears are probably going to be fairly quiet at the deadline, but this is the NFL. This is the trade deadline. This is smokescreen season. Things change and they change all the time. I think we'd be naive to act like Ryan Poles wasn't working the phone, seeing what is out there. So name a player you would like to see the Bears trade for. Small player, big player, blockbuster, whatever it is. If there is someone out there, who would you like to see the Bears trade for at the NFL trade deadline? Because at the end of the day, it's very much a possibility. All right, that's going to do it for Chicago Bears. Now, if you want more content on the channel, hit that subscribe button. We'll be live this afternoon, like I said, so be sure to join us for all of that. We'll see you guys soon. Bear down.